The Christmas lights blurred through my tears as I sat alone in my kitchen, still wearing the red velvet dress I'd ironed specially for the evening. The grandfather clock Robert's wedding gift to me 40 years ago chimed 9 times, each ring a bitter reminder that I should have been surrounded by family at church right now, not clutching cold tea in an empty house. I picked up my phone again, rereading the text from my son James that had arrived just 30 minutes before I was due to be picked up. Mom, Caroline's got a migraine. Can't make Christmas Eve service. We'll see you tomorrow morning at church instead. The third last-minute cancellation this month. Always with a different excuse, always delivered through James rather than directly from Caroline herself. I'd spent all afternoon baking gingerbread cookies for my grandchildren, using my mother's recipe that had been in our family for generations. The cookie tin sat on my counter, festive red lid mocking me. At 72, I'd learned to swallow disappointments. After Robert passed 5 years ago, I'd grown accustomed to adjusting plans and finding contentment in small joys. But something about tonight's cancellation felt different, perhaps because I'd overheard something at the grocery store 2 days ago that I couldn't shake from my mind. Maureen Jenkins from my church quilting circle had been talking to someone in the produce section. Saw Carolyn with all 3 kids at the Christmas village downtown last night. The little ones were so excited about meeting Santa. I'd paused, my hand hovering over the cranberries. That was the same night Caroline had texted again through James that all 3 children had stomach bugs and needed to cancel our planned cookie decorating evening. My refrigerator hummed in the silence of my kitchen. Outside, snow fell softly, coating my small garden with white. The nativity scene Robert had hand-carved sat on my mantel, the faces of Mary and Joseph warm in the glow of my Christmas tree lights. 47 years of Christmas Eve spent at the candlelight service, first as newlyweds, then with James as a child, then with James and Caroline and their children until the past 3 years, when the excuses began. I set down my teacup and straightened my shoulders. Tomorrow was Christmas Day. The church would be full, and for once, I wouldn't simply nod and smile at whatever excuse Caroline offered. It was time for truth, wrapped not in festive paper but in the dignity of my 72 years of life experience. Morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight glinting off fresh snow. I dressed carefully in my best winter coat, deep burgundy wool Robert had given me our last Christmas together. My hands trembled slightly as I fastened my pearl earrings, but my resolve remained firm. The church parking lot was nearly full when I arrived. I recognized James's SUV immediately, parked near the front. They'd arrived early, something they never seemed able to do when plans included me. I took a deep breath of cold December air and walked through the main doors. The sanctuary was warm and fragrant with pine and cinnamon. Poinsettias lined the altar, and the choir was already assembled in their red robes. I spotted them immediately. James, Caroline, and my 3 grandchildren seated halfway up the center aisle, all dressed in coordinating outfits. 10-year-old Emma saw me first, her face lighting up as she waved enthusiastically. "Grandma!" she called out, drawing the attention of several nearby congregants. I smiled and made my way to their pew. James stood to let me in, giving me a quick hug that smelled of the cologne I'd given him last Christmas. "Merry Christmas, Mom," he said, genuine warmth in his voice that made my heart ache. My son wasn't the problem. He never had been. "Merry Christmas," I replied, moving past him to sit beside Emma, who immediately took my hand in hers. 8-year-old Liam and 6-year-old Noah leaned around their sister to grin at me, Noah missing his 2 front teeth. Caroline sat at the far end of the pew, elegant in a cream-colored sweater dress, her blonde hair arranged perfectly. She gave me a tight smile. "Eleanor, Merry Christmas. Sorry about last night. Terrible migraine." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. The organ began playing "O Come All Ye Faithful," and the congregation rose to sing. Throughout the opening hymns and the children's nativity pageant, I wrestled with myself. Was I being petty? Oversensitive? Was I imagining a pattern that wasn't there? But then Noah turned to Caroline during a reading and said, clearly enough for me to hear, "Mommy, can we go back to the Christmas village tonight? I want to ride the train again like we did yesterday." Caroline hushed him quickly, her eyes darting to me before focusing studiously on the altar. James, seated between us, seemed not to have heard. My suspicions crystallized into certainty, cold and hard as ice. When the service ended, Pastor Matthews invited everyone to the fellowship hall for coffee and Christmas cookies. The children raced ahead, excited about the promised treats, with James following to supervise. Caroline lingered, gathering her designer handbag and cashmere scarf, clearly hoping to avoid being alone with me. "Caroline," I said quietly, "I need to speak with you." She glanced around as if seeking escape, then sighed. "Can it wait, Eleanor? It's Christmas." "Yes, it is Christmas," I agreed. "A time for family and truth." Her perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together. "What are you talking about?" The sanctuary had nearly emptied. Only the altar guild remained, extinguishing candles and gathering hymnals. "I know you weren't home with a migraine last night," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "Just like the children weren't sick when you canceled our cookie decorating. Or how your mother didn't actually need emergency help when you canceled our lunch plans last month." Color drained from Caroline's face. "You're confused. At your age." "My age has given me enough experience to recognize when I'm being deliberately excluded," I interrupted, the words I'd rehearsed in my mind flowing more smoothly than I'd expected. "Noah just mentioned going to the Christmas village yesterday the same time you were supposedly suffering from a migraine." Caroline's lips pressed into a thin line. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it? Because from where I stand, it seems like you're making excuses to keep my grandchildren and my son away from me." "You're being dramatic," she said, her voice hardening. "James and I have our own family traditions. We can't always accommodate your expectations." "Accommodation would suggest some effort on your part," I replied. "What I've experienced is outright deception. You've been lying to me, Caroline, using my son as the messenger for your excuses." Her eyes narrowed. "James agrees with me about how much time we spend with you. He's just too nice to say it." The words struck like a physical blow. I glanced toward the fellowship hall where James was helping Noah select a cookie from a tray. Could it be true? Was my son complicit in these deceptions? Before I could respond, Pastor Matthews approached, his expression concerned. "Everything all right here, ladies? The fellowship hall is filled with Christmas cheer you're missing." Caroline immediately adopted a solicitous expression. "Pastor, would you mind escorting Eleanor to get some coffee? I'm worried about her today. She seems confused and is making some concerning accusations. At her age, we worry about her being alone so much." I felt a flush of anger rise from my chest to my face. "I am not confused, and I'd thank you not to speak about me as if I weren't standing right here." Pastor Matthews looked between us, clearly sensing the tension. "Perhaps we should all take a moment to remember the spirit of Christmas and—" "The spirit of Christmas includes honesty," I said firmly. "Caroline has been systematically excluding me from family events while providing excuses through my son. I just learned they were at the Christmas village last night when I was told they couldn't attend church with me due to Caroline's supposed migraine." Caroline's eyes widened, clearly not expecting me to speak so plainly to our pastor. "This is ridiculous, James," she called out, her voice carrying into the fellowship hall. "Can you come here, please?" My son appeared moments later, concern etched on his face so like his father's, it made my heart contract. "What's going on?" Caroline spoke before I could. "Your mother is making a scene, claiming we're deliberately excluding her from family activities. She's confused about last night. James looked at me, bewilderment in his eyes. Mom? I met my son's gaze directly. Noah mentioned being at the Christmas village yesterday, the same time Caroline was supposedly suffering from a migraine too severe to attend church with me. Something flickered across James's face, recognition, then discomfort. He glanced at Caroline, whose expression had hardened. It's not like that, Mom, he began, but his voice lacked conviction. Then what is it like? I asked, keeping my voice level. Because from where I stand, it seems I'm only included in your lives when it's convenient for Caroline. That's unfair, James protested, but again there was that flicker in his eyes. Pastor Matthews cleared his throat. Perhaps this conversation would be better continued in my office, away from, he gestured toward the fellowship hall, where several curious parishioners were now watching our exchange. No, Caroline said firmly. We're not having this conversation at all. Not today. It's Christmas, for heaven's sake. She turned to James. Get the kids. We're leaving. Running away won't resolve this, I said quietly. Sooner or later, the truth needs to be faced. Caroline's expression was cold. The truth, Eleanor, is that you're becoming difficult in your old age. You demand too much time. You call too often. You expect to be included in everything. James and I have our own lives, our own family. Caroline, James warned, glancing around at the growing audience. No, let her continue, I said, feeling strangely calm now that the confrontation I'd feared was finally happening. I'd like to know exactly how my weekly phone calls and monthly dinner invitations constitute demanding too much. Caroline's composure slipped. You don't get it, do you? I didn't sign up to have my mother-in-law scrutinizing my every decision, judging my parenting, constantly reminiscing about how James's father would have done things differently. I have never criticized your parenting, I said, genuinely surprised. You don't have to say it out loud. It's in every look, every sigh, every time you mention what Robert would have thought. James stepped between us. This isn't the place. Mom, we'll talk about this later, I promise. When? I asked. After Caroline invents another excuse to cancel. The fellowship hall had grown quieter, with more people obviously listening to our exchange. Emma appeared at James's elbow, her young face confused and concerned. Dad, why is everyone fighting on Christmas? James put his arm around his daughter. We're not fighting, sweetheart. Just having a grown-up discussion. Emma looked at me, her eyes so like Robert's filled with worry. Are you okay, Grandma? I felt my anger soften at my granddaughter's concern. I'm fine, Emma, just a little sad, because I miss seeing you all. But we're right here, she said, with the simple logic of childhood. Today, yes, I agreed, but not as often as I'd like. Emma frowned. Is that why you weren't with us at the Christmas village yesterday? Mom said you were too tired to come. The silence that followed was deafening. James stared at his daughter, then at Caroline, whose face had gone rigid. Too tired? I repeated softly. That's interesting, since I was never invited. James turned to Caroline, questions in his eyes. Caroline's composure cracked. Fine. Yes, I told the children you were too tired instead of inviting you. Because every time you're around, James spends the whole time checking if you're comfortable, if you're having fun, if you need anything. The children perform for your approval. Everything becomes about you. Caroline, that's enough, James said sharply. No, it's not enough. She snapped. For 3 years I've been managing this situation, trying to create some balance, some space for us to be our own family without Eleanor's constant presence and expectations. By lying? James asked, his voice dangerously quiet. By using me to deliver fake excuses? By telling our children their grandmother is too tired to join us when she wasn't even invited? Caroline faltered, seeming to realize she'd overplayed her hand. I was trying to protect our family time. By destroying mine? I asked, my voice breaking slightly despite my efforts to remain composed. Those children are all I have left of my family, Caroline, and you've been systematically cutting me out of their lives. Pastor Matthews stepped forward again. I think we all need a moment to... Did you know about this? James interrupted, addressing me. I met my son's troubled gaze. I suspected something was wrong. The excuses were becoming too frequent, too convenient. And then I overheard Maureen Jenkins mention seeing all of you at the Christmas village the night Caroline claimed the children were sick. James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture, so like his father that it made my throat tighten. Why didn't you say something to me? Would you have believed me over Caroline? I asked simply. The flash of guilt in his eyes was answer enough. Emma tugged at her father's sleeve. Dad? Is Grandma coming to Christmas dinner? James looked at his daughter, then at me, then at Caroline. Something in his expression hardened with resolve. Yes, Emma, Grandma is definitely coming to Christmas dinner. In fact, she'll be at a lot more family events from now on. Caroline's lips parted in protest, but James silenced her with a look I'd never seen him direct at his wife before. We'll discuss this at home, he said to Caroline, his voice low but firm. Then he turned to me. Mom, I'm sorry. I had no idea this was happening, no idea Caroline was. He trailed off, clearly still processing the depth of the deception. I know, James, I said, and found that I believed it. My son could be oblivious, but he wasn't cruel. Noah and Liam had joined us now, drawn by the tension they could sense even if they didn't understand it. Grandma's coming for Christmas dinner, Emma announced to her brothers, who responded with cheers that lightened the heavy atmosphere. Caroline's expression was thunderous, but she said nothing as James gathered the children. We should go home and finish preparing, he said, not meeting his wife's eyes. Mom, dinner's at 4. I'll text you the address of Caroline's sister's house. That's where we're having it this year. Another detail I wasn't informed of, I murmured, but nodded. I'll be there. As they walked away, Caroline rigid with anger beside my clearly troubled son, Pastor Matthews touched my arm gently. Are you all right, Eleanor? I took a deep breath, watching my grandchildren's retreating backs. I'm not sure yet, but I think I will be. That took courage, he said quietly, standing up for yourself. It took desperation, I corrected him. And 72 years of learning when enough is enough. He smiled sadly. The path of peace sometimes requires confronting uncomfortable truths. I hope healing can begin for your family today. On Christmas of all days, I said, a hint of regret coloring my voice. Perhaps especially on Christmas, he suggested. A day for new beginnings. I nodded, feeling suddenly exhausted by the confrontation, but also lighter somehow, as if a burden I'd been carrying had been set down at last. As I made my way to the fellowship hall for a much-needed cup of coffee, Maureen Jenkins approached, concern evident in her expression. Eleanor, dear, is everything all right? That looked rather intense. I considered deflecting, offering the kind of polite evasion I'd perfected over decades of social interactions. But something in me had shifted today. Not yet, I answered honestly. But I think it might be, eventually. Would you join me for coffee? I could use a friend right now. Maureen linked her arm through mine. Of course, dear, and you can tell me all about it, or nothing at all, whatever you need. As we walked together, I glanced back at the sanctuary, at the nativity scene displayed near the altar. The carved figure of Mary gazed down at the infant Jesus, her expression one of both wonder and foreknowledge of the difficult path ahead. I understood that look better now than I ever had before. Truth, once unwrapped, could not be easily contained again. What would happen at Christmas dinner remained to be seen, but for the first time in years, I felt a genuine hope that I might truly be included in my family once more. The grandfather clock at home had likely just struck noon. Each hour, a new beginning. Each day, another chance. At 72, I was old enough to know that confrontations rarely resolved neatly, that healing took time, that some wounds left scars. But I was also old enough to know my own worth, to demand the respect and honesty I deserved. As Maureen and I settled at a table with our coffee, I caught sight of a text message from James, lighting up my phone screen. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I had no idea. We will fix this." Maybe Pastor Matthews was right. Maybe Christmas was exactly the right day for truth and new beginnings after all. The drive to Caroline's sister's house felt longer than the 20 minutes it actually took. I followed the directions James had texted, navigating through neighborhoods decorated with inflatable Santas and twinkling light displays. My stomach knotted with each mile. The cookie tin and small wrapped gifts for my grandchildren sat on the passenger seat, silent companions to my churning thoughts. What awaited me? Would Caroline have composed herself, presenting a serene facade while seething underneath? Would James have confronted her further, creating a tension I'd feel the moment I walked through the door? And the children, how much had they understood of the morning's revelations? At 72, I'd attended enough uncomfortable family gatherings to recognize their patterns: the overly bright greetings, the careful conversation, topics selected to avoid provocation, the strategic seating arrangements to separate combatants. I'd seen it all, just never expected to be the cause. I pulled into the driveway of a large Tudor-style home I'd never visited before. Several cars were already parked outside, including James's SUV. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, applied a fresh coat of coral lipstick. Robert always said it brought out the warmth in my complexion, and gathered my contributions to the meal. The front door opened before I reached it. James stood there, relief evident on his face when he saw me. "You came," he said simply. "I said I would," I replied, offering him the cookie tin. "Your favorite gingerbread, your father's recipe." Something flickered in his eyesedness, regret, or perhaps both. He took the tin with one hand and embraced me with the other. "Mom, I am so sorry. I had no idea Caroline was." "Let's not start with that," I interrupted gently. "It's Christmas. Let's try to make it a good one for the children." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Caroline's in the kitchen with her sister. The kids are in the family room with their cousins." I stepped inside, the warmth and scent of roasting turkey enveloping me. The house was beautifully decorated, with garlands draped along the staircase and a towering Christmas tree visible in the living room. Professional looking, like something from a magazine, Caroline style exactly. "Grandma!" 3 voices called in unison as my grandchildren spotted me from the family room. They rushed over, Emma leading the charge with Noah and Liam close behind. I set down my bags to embrace them properly, drinking in their excited faces and the warmth of their small bodies against mine. These were what Caroline had been stealing from me. "We thought you weren't coming anymore," Noah said, his missing front teeth creating a slight whistle. "Why would you think that, sweetheart?" I asked, smoothing his cowlick. "Mom was crying in the kitchen," Emma explained matter-of-factly. "She said everything was ruined." James cleared his throat. "Why don't you 3 show Grandma where to put her coat and the presents she brought?" They eagerly led me to a guest room where coats were piled on the bed, chattering about their morning presents and what Santa had brought. I listened attentively, savoring their enthusiasm, but part of my mind remained fixed on the coming encounter with Caroline. When we returned to the main part of the house, James steered me toward the living room. "Mom, this is Caroline's sister Melissa and her husband Paul." Melissa was younger than Caroline by several years, but shared the same blonde good looks and polished appearance. She greeted me with a warmth that seemed genuine. "Eleanor, We've heard so much about you. I'm so glad you could join us this year. The unspoken question hung in the air. Why hadn't I been invited in previous years? Had Caroline told her family the same lies she'd told mine? Thank you for having me, I replied, accepting the glass of wine Paul offered. Your home is beautiful. Small talk followed about the children, the weather, the morning church service. Neither Melissa nor Paul gave any indication they were aware of the morning's confrontation, but tension thrummed beneath the pleasant conversation like a bass note too low to hear but still felt in the bones. Eventually, the inevitable could be postponed no longer. Caroline appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral, eyes slightly reddened. Our gazes met across the room. Eleanor, she said, her voice steady. Dinner will be ready in about 20 minutes. Can I help with anything? I offered, the social nicety automatic after decades of family gatherings. Something like surprise flickered in Caroline's eyes. Actually, yes, if you wouldn't mind helping me finish the gravy. James shot me a concerned look, but I nodded reassuringly as I followed Caroline to the kitchen. The room was warm and fragrant, every surface gleaming and organized. So different from my own kitchen, with its collection of mismatched serving dishes and the wooden spoons Robert had carved over the years. For a long moment, Caroline busied herself at the stove, her back to me. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight, with controlled emotion. I suppose you think you've won. I sighed, disappointment settling heavily in my chest. This isn't a competition, Caroline. Isn't it? She asked, turning to face me at last. Because it feels like one. One I've been losing since the day I married James. I frowned, genuinely confused. What do you mean? Saint Eleanor, she said bitterly. The perfect mother, the perfect widow, the keeper of family traditions and Robert's precious memory. How could I possibly compete with that? I leaned against the counter, studying this woman who had been my daughter-in-law for 15 years, but remained in many ways a stranger to me. Is that really how you see me? As competition? Caroline stirred the gravy with sharp, angry movements. Do you know what it's like to constantly hear about how Robert would have done things? How your mother-in-law's husband was apparently perfect in every way. How your children should be more like their father was at their age. I felt a chill of recognition. Had I done that? Had my reminiscences about Robert, my attempts to keep his memory alive for the grandchildren he never met, come across as criticism? Caroline, I said carefully, if I've ever made you feel judged or inadequate, that was never my intention. She gave a short, humorless laugh. Your intentions don't matter. The effect is the same. A timer dinged, and Caroline moved to check the rolls in the oven. I watched her efficient movements, the way she avoided my gaze. Why didn't you ever talk to me about this? I asked, instead of systematically excluding me and lying about it. Her shoulders tensed. I tried in the beginning. You never heard me. You were too busy telling James how his father would have fixed the leak in the bathroom sink differently, or how Robert always made sure the Christmas lights were hung before December 1st. I cast my mind back, trying to remember those early years after Robert's death, when grief had clouded everything. Had I been so caught in my own pain that I'd failed to see Caroline's discomfort? I'm sorry, I said simply. I didn't realize. Caroline closed the oven door with more force than necessary. It doesn't matter now. James is furious with me. He says I've been cruel and manipulative. He can't understand why I didn't just talk to him about it. Why didn't you? I asked softly. She paused, vulnerability briefly replacing the anger in her expression. Because he would have taken your side. He always does. His father's son, through and through. Before I could respond, Melissa entered the kitchen. Everything okay in here? The natives are getting restless. Caroline immediately straightened, her mask of composure slipping back into place. Just finishing up, Eleanor. Would you mind taking the basket of rolls to the table? The dining room table was a masterpiece of holiday decorating fine china, crystal glasses, and an elaborate centerpiece of pine boughs and cranberries. The children had been seated at a smaller table in the adjacent breakfast nook, much to their delight. James stood near the head of the table, anxiety evident in the set of his shoulders. Dinner proceeded with surface pleasantness, everyone making a valiant effort for the sake of the holiday. Melissa and Paul carried much of the conversation, seemingly unaware of the currents running beneath the festivities. The food was delicious, though I found myself eating mechanically, my appetite dulled by the unresolved tension. When the meal ended, the children raced back to the family room while the adults began clearing the table. I followed Caroline into the kitchen with a stack of plates. The turkey was perfectly cooked, I offered. And the cranberry sauce, was that your mother's recipe? Caroline looked at me suspiciously, as if searching for hidden criticism. No, I found it in a magazine. It was delicious. I'd love the recipe. She set the plates down with a clatter. Why are you doing this? Being nice after everything that happened this morning? I placed my own stack of dishes on the counter more carefully. Because I'm trying to find a way forward, Caroline. For James's sake. For the children's sake. For all of us. There is no all of us, she said, her voice low but intense. That's the problem. You want us to be one big happy family, with you at the center, keeping Robert's memory alive. But we're not your family anymore. James, the kids, and I are a family. You're... She stopped abruptly. I'm what? I prompted, steeling myself. Caroline looked away. You're an obligation, a responsibility, a source of guilt for James. The words struck deeper than I'd expected, voicing a fear I'd carried since Robert's death. Was that all I was now? A burden? Caroline. James's voice came from the doorway, cold with anger. That's enough. She spun to face him, color high in her cheeks. Of course you'd walk in at that exact moment, hear the worst possible thing. I heard plenty, he said, and I've been thinking about what I heard at church this morning, about all the lies you've told, about how you've been manipulating all of us. James, I began, uncomfortable with his harsh tone despite my own hurt. He held up a hand. No, Mom, this needs to be said. He turned back to Caroline. You had no right to make those decisions for us, to decide my mother should be excluded. To lie to our children about why their grandmother wasn't with us. Caroline's expression hardened. Someone had to make those decisions. You never would have. You can't say no to her. That wasn't your call to make. James's voice rose. Then he visibly reined himself in, glancing toward the family room where the children played. More quietly, he continued, if you had concerns, you should have talked to me, to us, together. Instead, you went behind my back. You used me to deliver your lies. Tears welled in Caroline's eyes. Because you never listen when it comes to your mother. She's Saint Eleanor, keeper of your father's perfect memory. The rest of us can never measure up. James looked genuinely bewildered. What are you talking about? I touched my son's arm gently. I think Caroline feels I've been critical of her. That I compare her and Dudo how things were when your father was alive. That's not, James began, but Caroline interrupted. Every Christmas, every birthday, every holiday. Your father always did this. Your father would have loved that. That's not how your father would have handled it. It never stops. James stared at his wife, then at me, confusion evident in his expression. Mom just misses Dad. She's trying to keep his memory alive for the kids. How is that criticism? Because it always comes with that look, Caroline said, mimicking a disapproving expression. That little sigh that says we're doing it wrong. That Robert would have done better. I felt a wave of genuine dismay. Caroline, I never meant. I know you never meant to, she said, some of the fight going out of her. That almost makes it worse. You don't even realize you're doing it. James ran a hand through his hair, visibly struggling to process this new perspective. So instead of talking to us about it, you decided to just eliminate Mom from our lives, bit by bit? Caroline looked away. It wasn't like that, not at first. I just needed some space, some family time without feeling judged. But then, she trailed off. Then it became easier to make excuses than to face the situation. I finished for her, understanding dawning despite my hurt. And once the pattern was established, it was hard to break. She gave a small nod, not meeting my eyes. The kitchen fell silent except for the distant sounds of children playing and Christmas music from the living room. The three of us stood frozen in our triangle of hurt, anger, and misunderstanding. Finally, James spoke. We need to fix this, all of us. How? Caroline asked, sounding genuinely lost. Before anyone could answer, Emma appeared in the doorway, Noah and Liam peering around her. Is Grandma in trouble? Noah asked, his young face concerned. Caroline looked stricken. No, sweetheart. Why would you think that? Because you're all in here talking in serious voices instead of having dessert, Emma explained logically. And earlier at church, you said Grandma was confused. I exchanged glances with James and Caroline, seeing my own discomfort reflected in their expressions. How much had the children absorbed of the tension surrounding them today? No one's in trouble, James assured them. Grown-ups just need to talk about things sometimes. Like when me and Noah fight over the tablet? Liam asked. James smiled faintly. Something like that. Sometimes even grown-ups need to work out misunderstandings. Emma, perceptive as always, looked between Caroline and me. Is that why we don't see Grandma very much? Because you and Mom had a fight? The innocent question hung in the air, demanding an honest answer. I looked at Caroline, silently asking permission to respond. After a moment, she gave a small nod. I knelt to Emma's level, mindful of my arthritic knees. Your mom and I had some misunderstandings. We didn't talk about them the way we should have. But we're going to fix that. So, we'll see you more? Noah asked, hopefully. My throat tightened with emotion. I hope so, sweetheart. Can Grandma come to the Christmas village with us tonight? Liam asked, directing the question to his mother. Caroline hesitated, then nodded. If she'd like to. Would you, Grandma? Emma asked, her eyes bright with anticipation. I glanced at Caroline, searching her expression for the truth behind her acquiescence. Was it merely for show? But I saw something else there, resignation perhaps, but also a tentative openness. I'd love to, I told my grandchildren, rising slowly to my feet. Can we have dessert now? Noah asked, practical as always. James laughed, the sound breaking some of the tension. Yes, buddy, let's have dessert. As the children cheered and ran back to the dining room, I found myself alone with Caroline once more, James having followed the children. You don't have to come tonight, she said quietly. I know it's just the kids pressuring you. I studied her face, seeing beyond the perfect makeup to the insecurity beneath. Is that what you want? For me to decline? She didn't answer immediately, busying herself with arranging cookies on a serving platter. I don't know what I want anymore, except for James to stop looking at me like I'm a monster. He doesn't think you're a monster, I said. He's hurt and confused, we all are. Caroline's hands stilled. You have every right to hate me. I don't hate you, Caroline, I said truthfully. I'm hurt by your actions, yes, but hate? No. She looked at me directly for the first time since I'd arrived. How can you be so reasonable about this? I've been deliberately excluding you from your son's life, your grandchildren's lives. If someone did that to me, I'd be furious. I considered the question seriously. Oh, I've been angry, and hurt, and confused, but I've lived long enough to know that anger rarely solves anything. And I've lost enough to know that family, whatever form it takes, is too precious to throw away over pride. It wasn't just pride, she said softly. I know, I acknowledged. And we have a lot to talk about, all of us. But maybe not today. Today is for the children. Caroline nodded slowly. And the Christmas village? I'd like to come, if you're truly okay with it. Something shifted in her expression. Not warmth exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. I think that would be good. For the kids. For all of us, I hope, I added. She didn't agree, but she didn't contradict me either. It was a small step, but a step nonetheless. Dessert was served with forced cheerfulness, the adults making a valiant effort to maintain the holiday spirit for the children's sake. When the plates were cleared and the gifts exchanged, James announced it was time to head to the Christmas village. It's open until 9 on Christmas Day, he explained to me. They have lights, a train ride for the kids, hot chocolate. It's become something of a tradition. A tradition I knew nothing about, I thought but didn't say. Instead, I smiled and expressed enthusiasm as I helped bundle the children into their coats. The Christmas village was set up in the town square, a collection of decorated booths selling crafts and treats, a small train that circled the perimeter, and an elaborate light display synchronized to holiday music. Despite the earlier tension, I found myself genuinely enjoying the festive atmosphere and the children's excitement. James stayed close by my side, solicitous in a way that made me wonder if Caroline's accusations held some truth. Did he feel obligated to me? Was his attention to my comfort a burden rather than a natural expression of affection? James, I said quietly as we watched the children board the train, Caroline supervising. Are we okay, you and I? He looked surprised by the question. Of course we are. Why wouldn't we be? Caroline said some things that made me wonder if you feel my presence is an obligation, a responsibility. His expression softened. Mom, no, you've never been a burden. But the way Caroline described it, you always taking my side, feeling caught between us, there must be some truth to that for her to feel so strongly. James was silent for a moment, watching the train begin its circuit. Maybe I haven't always handled things well, he admitted finally. After Dad died, I worried about you being alone. Maybe I overcompensated, and maybe I didn't notice how that affected Caroline. We all made mistakes, I said. The important thing is that we recognize them and try to do better. He smiled, faintly. When did you get so wise? Around my 65th birthday, I replied, matching his smile. It came with a senior discount card. He laughed, a genuine sound that warmed me more than the cup of hot chocolate in my hands. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the train make its rounds, the children waving excitedly each time they passed. When the ride ended, Noah ran straight to me. Grandma, did you see me? I was the conductor. I saw you, I assured him, straightening his lopsided hat. You were the finest conductor the Christmas village has ever had. Caroline approached Liam on one hip, despite his protests that he was too big to be carried. The hot chocolate stand is closing soon, she said. Should we get some before we head home? I noted her use of we with cautious hope. That sounds lovely. As we walked toward the stand, Emma slipped her hand into mine. I'm glad you came, Grandma. It's better with you here. My heart swelled at her simple honesty. It's better for me too, sweetheart. The hot chocolate was served in festive red cups with candy cane stirrers, the perfect ending to an imperfect but important day. As we sipped our drinks, I caught Caroline watching me with an unreadable expression. What is it? I asked when the children were distracted by a nearby ornament display. She hesitated, then said, I was just thinking that I've never seen you like this. Like what? Relaxed. In the moment. She gestured vaguely. You're usually so proper. Like you're always remembering how Robert would want things done. The observation startled me. Was that how I came across? I don't mean to be rigid. I know, she said, surprising me further. I think I just never gave you the chance to be anything else in my mind. I had this idea of who you were, and I never looked past it. It was perhaps the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. Maybe we've both been seeing each other through filters, I suggested, rather than as we really are. She didn't respond directly, but her expression was thoughtful as she called the children back for the walk to the parking lot. The drive home was quiet, my mind replaying the events of the day. Nothing had been resolved, not really. The hurt remained, the trust broken. But something had shifted a crack in the wall that had been built between Caroline and me, a small opening that might, with care and time, widen into understanding. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone chimed with a text message from James. Thank you for today, for your patience, for not giving up on us. We'll talk more soon, all of us. Love you, Mom. My house was dark and still when I entered, the Christmas tree lights having switched off on their timer hours ago. I turned them back on, needing their warm glow as I settled into Robert's old armchair. Quite a Christmas, wasn't it, Robert? I said aloud to the empty room. Talking to him had become a habit in the years since his death, a comfort I rarely indulged when others were present. Perhaps that had been part of the problemy private conversations made public, my memories becoming a measuring stick without my intending it. The grandfather clock chimed 9 times, its familiar sound grounding me in the present moment. On the mantel, the nativity scene Robert had carved caught the light, the figures of Mary and Joseph watching over the infant Jesus with expressions of wonder and protective love. Parenthood, I reflected, never truly ended. It evolved, transformed, but remained at its core about love and letting go, sometimes simultaneously, sometimes in painful opposition. James was a grown man with his own family, navigating the complex terrain of marriage and parenthood as best he could. Caroline was doing the same, her methods misguided but her motivations to protect her nuclear family, to establish her own traditions understandable in their way. And I was learning, even at 72, that there was still growth to be done, understanding to be reached, forgiveness to be offered and accepted. My phone chimed again, a message from Caroline this time, the first direct communication she'd initiated in months. The children want to know if you'd like to come for New Year's Day brunch. No pressure. Think about it. Not warm, not effusive, but an opening nonetheless. I typed back, I'd like that very much, thank you. Then, after a moment's consideration, I added, and thank you for today, for letting me be part of it despite everything. Her response came quickly. It was good for the kids to have you there. Not, it was good to have you there, but a step, a small one, but real. I set my phone aside and gazed at the Christmas tree, at the ornaments collected over decades, the ones James had made in elementary school, the crystal angels Robert had given me on our anniversaries. The delicate glass balls Emma had helped me hang just a few weeks ago during a rare visit. Life was a collection of such moments, strung together like the colored lights on the tree, some bright and joyful, others dim with sadness or regret, but all part of the same continuous strand. Today had brought both darkness and light, truth both painful and necessary. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Caroline and I had years of misunderstanding to untangle, James his own role to examine. But tonight, in the quiet of Christmas evening, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel when I'd walked into church that morning: hope. Not the naive hope of perfect resolution, but the mature hope that comes with age and experience, the knowledge that broken things, while never quite the same, can still be mended into something beautiful and strong. Different but whole. The clock ticked steadily, marking the passage of time. Outside, snow began to fall again, adding a fresh layer to the Christmas blanket covering my garden. I thought of the seeds sleeping beneath the snow, waiting for spring's warmth to emerge and grow. Perhaps this confrontation, painful as it had been, was like the winter snow necessary for new growth, for a more honest relationship with my son and his family. Not what I had expected or wished for on Christmas morning, but perhaps, in its way, a gift nonetheless. I touched the pearl earrings Robert had given me so many years ago, remembering his words as I'd opened the box: beauty born from irritation, strength forged through time. Time, patience, truth, the willingness to begin again. At 72, I had learned that endings were rarely neat, beginnings seldom clear until viewed in retrospect. Life was messier than that, more complex, more rich with possibility, even in its difficulties. I reached for the photo album on the side table, opening to the image of Robert holding newborn James, his expression one of wonder and terror and love. "We did our best," I told him softly. "Now it's their turn to find their way." The Christmas tree lights reflected in the glass covering the photograph, overlaying the past with the present in a shimmer of color. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, its own opportunities for healing. But tonight, I would sit in the quiet of my home, surrounded by memories, open to the possibility of a future different from, but no less valuable than the past. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering all in a clean white blanket, ready to receive new footprints when morning came.